Full house on a Saturday morning. So Quad must be doing something right if everybody is keen to hear, what we have to say today. Dear Ambassador Suzuki, High Commissioner Philip Green, on behalf of the Ministry of External Affairs and the Observer Research Foundation, I'm very pleased to welcome all of you to this very first edition of the Quad Think Tank Forum in Delhi. We have amongst us members of think tanks from the 4 Quad countries: Observer Research Foundation India, East-West Center from the US, Japan Institute of International Affairs, and the Australia Strategic Policy Institute. I would also like to specially acknowledge the Quad Raisina Young Fellows, also the very first cohort, participants from Indo-Pacific countries and others. Today's sessions will focus on where the Quad is headed in the next 10 years. As a diplomat who is also the Quad Sous Sherpa, I'm very keen to hear your insights, your suggestions, and feedback. The highlight of today's event is a ministerial session in which, among others, our Foreign Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, will share his vision about Quad in the next decade. The Think Tank Forum today is a true marker of the rapid strides that Quad has made in its second iteration. In 2019, the foreign ministers started meeting annually on sidelines of the UNGA. Later, they started meeting at standalone events. Since 2021, Quad engagement was elevated to the leaders level, and they have been meeting in summit format almost every year since then. The steady momentum, cadence of dialogue is an indicator of Quad's shared values, enduring commitment, and consensus about their priorities in the Indo-Pacific region. I must share that when I started on this desk about 3.5 years ago, even in 2020, when Quad met, they would not mention the word Quad in their readouts and press releases. We would say India, Japan, Australia, and USA met today. So compared to that, not soon after, in 21, we started a standalone chapter on Quad in the annual reports of our ministry. There was also a time when every Quad country would issue a separate readout after a meeting, simply because we could not agree on our messaging. With growing strategic convergences and outlooks, we are issuing joint statements after meetings of our leaders and foreign ministers. Quad engagement is no longer limited to the foreign ministries of the 4 countries. We have several others who are very closely involved: the National Security Councils, the ministries which are dealing with climate, energy, healthcare, and infrastructure and other critical areas. The agenda of Quad has also evolved. It has broadened from issuing principles, evolving technical standards in specific domains, to a commitment for delivery of public goods. Quad has also positioned itself as a force for global good, one with a practical and very positive agenda. Whether we are cooperating bilaterally or amongst the 4 Quad partners, the focus is on providing trusted and viable alternatives to the region. In recent years, we have also attempted to co-opt other stakeholders into Quad's deliberations and efforts. So we see the presence and involvement of industry, R&D organizations, and others in the Quad framework. Conversations with think tanks are very much a part of these efforts. They seek to demystify Quad enhance transparency about what we do, and also bring in fresh and new perspectives. These discussions will also help us mainstream the concept of Quad and its relevance to foreign policy constructs, especially for the region and in the regional architecture that prevails. As India prepares to host the Quad Summit later this year, we are making think tanks key partners in our preparations and in also Quad proceedings. In fact, at the Global Technology Summit this year, we had a session on DPI and Quad, which was a very lively discussion on what Quad can do to bring in more digital public goods to the region. Later this year, we would also be partnering with think tanks in a couple of ASEAN countries to familiarize the region with Quad's agenda and objectives and also counter disinformation. At the Raisina Dialogue this year, we have the first cohort of Quad Young Fellows who have added dynamism and a lot of enthusiasm to the proceedings here. We hope that this exposure to Quad will be a very useful primer for these young diplomats as they navigate the geopolitical issues in their career. I would like to end with my very sincere appreciation to Samir Saran and his excellent team at the ORF, and also my colleague from the Policy Planning Division, Raghuram, who've made a lot of effort to put this excellent event together. So I look forward to the discussions today and hearing your thoughts and creative ideas.
Well, thank you very much, Harsh, Professor Pant. And can I greet you all this morning with the word Yumalundi. Yumalundi is the word in the language of the indigenous people from around our capital, Canberra, which means hello and welcome. And in greeting you in this way, I'm demonstrating the respect of my High Commission and the Government of Australia to indigenous people here in Australia and all around the world. It's great to be sharing a stage once again with Vani Rao and with Hiroshi-san. Congratulations to you on your National Day celebration last night. Don't think I've seen a bigger one yet in New Delhi. There are many other distinguished guests and very good friends here, but I should mention in particular the fact that former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott has chosen to join us today. His prime ministership was full of determination on all of the things that the Quad stands for. It's great, sir, that you've chosen to join us and bring your lustre to this important gathering. So you're thinking today about the Quad over the last 30 years and where you go over the next 10. I've got a very personal perspective on this. I've been High Commissioner in India for 6 months. The last time that I was in New Delhi before I came here on this mission was in 2019. And I came as the senior official most focused on the Quad in Australia. When I think of those days and think of how tentative the steps of the Quad was then, and compare to now, the difference is stark. In those days, we were meeting as senior officials on the edges of other multilateral meetings. In those days, frequently, the statements that we released would be slender things of a few lines long. In those days, we had no agreed work program and we had no set agenda. You run the video forward to 2024 and you find annual Quad summits, you find a clarified work agenda, you find subgroups working on each of those fields week by week, month by month, and you find statements out of the summits and the many, many foreign ministers and other ministers' meetings that occur that show the real progress in the Quad. we have truly come a long way. Fundamentally, what we are trying to do is to shape a vision for our region. A region in which we want to see strategic balance. A region which is absent of coercion, where states have the sovereignty and the choices to frame their own futures. A region not dominated by the mighty. And a region in which the agreed rules and norms form the framework for state action. We are about offering public goods to those in the region. Genuine and enduring offerings that make those in the region understand the value of what we bring. And we operate through the principle that pooling our resources as a group of four and leveraging the collective and complementary strengths of our very different societies brings more, makes sure that the sum is greater than all of the parts. In all of this, we are very focused on the role of regional institutions across the Indo-Pacific. ASEAN, the Pacific Islands Forum, and IORA, the Indian Ocean Group. These two are mechanisms that give voice to the interests of small and medium-sized powers, that strengthen their sovereignty and resilience. All of this, all of what we're trying to do is summed up by the four principles that the Quad leaders enunciated last year. One, focused on prosperity and stability. Two, the importance of rules and norms and the multilateral system. Three, the centrality of regional institutions. And four, the need to deliver on the priorities of our partner countries, the other countries of the Indo-Pacific. I've looked at your agenda today, and I'm delighted that there is a big focus on critical tech. For those of us who have been in the business of diplomacy for decades, this is a relatively new field. We are used to dealing with traditional diplomatic engagement, the role of our militaries, what our infrastructural and aid institutions can do. But when I began my Foreign Service career, no one would have thought of technology or critical tech as a vector of regional stability and prosperity. Now it clearly is, and I'm delighted that a new generation of diplomats and those who work in adjacent fields will be focusing on that. In the time that remains, I just wanted to focus a little on what the Quad is doing in that field. We have 5 key themes on critical technology: the protection of critical infrastructure, workforce readiness, awareness and information sharing, AI and Internet of Things, cybersecurity, tackling criminal threat and ransomware, and cybersecurity capacity building. In each of these fields, we're making big progress. The Quad Cyber Challenge in 2023 brought together more than 85,000 individual participants from 600 different institutions to work together on the Cyber Challenge. We're working hard with our partners on the region on digital connectivity through access to critical and emerging technologies. I'm delighted in particular about what Australia and the United States are doing in the part of the region which is close to us, the Southwest Pacific, in undersea communications cables. Australia and the United States are working together to ensure that cable connectivity, which is being built by the private sector, can add spurs that ensures that as those cables cross the Pacific, they are connected to the small countries of the Southwest Pacific who would otherwise not get access to that very fast connectivity. I'm delighted that we are also supporting Palau, the first deployment of its kind in the region, to have open radio access network or open RAN capability. And it's important that we also work on the standards that underpin critical tech. And the Quad principles on critical and emerging technology standards provide a key agenda for where those standards should be heading both regionally and globally. As governments, we can't do this alone. And so I'm very pleased that we are harnessing the role of the private sector in ensuring that critical tech is protected and developed across our region. The Quad Investors Network has been established to align with Quad priorities and ensure that we can unlock the capital of the private sector and commercialize, which is key to the scaling of these big technologies. Working with that Quad Investors Network, we call it the QUIN, we have been able to launch the Quad Centre of Excellence in Quantum Information Services. We've held Quad Critical and Emerging Technology Business Investment Forums in the United States and Australia, rallying the support of the private sector to all we do. Underlying all of this, we need to build basic capability in our countries, and in particular in the field of STEM. And so the Quad Fellowship has been opened for masters and doctoral students to study science, technology, engineering, and mathematics in the United States. I'm delighted, particularly when I see so many of our friends from ASEAN in the region, to say that this has now been expanded to include candidates from all 10 ASEAN countries. And on top of all of this, the Quad Leaders Summit showed new initiatives in adjacent but important fields to critical technology, in clean energy, in infrastructure, and in health security. So I feel, we have come a long way in 5 years. In addition to all of the ways in which the Quad itself has matured, my final reflection is on what it is doing for each of our bilateral relationships. And I must say, what I sense is that that is bringing our officials and our ministers much closer, and that is harnessing dividends in each of our important and each of our strong bilateral relationships. We've come a long way in 5 years. Much of the structure is set. A key focus for Quad countries now must be in delivery. Let's see how far over the next 5 years we can see an assured, open, stable, and prosperous region that all of the citizens of the Indo-Pacific deserve. Thank you very much.
His Excellency Philip Green, High Commissioner of Australia, Ms. Vani Rao, Additional Secretary, Americas, Ministry of External Affairs of India, Dr. Samil Sarang, President of the Observer Research Foundation in absentia, Prime Minister Tony Abbott, a dear friend of late Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, eminent speakers and panelists, excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure to address the inaugural Raisina Quad Think Tank Forum with distinguished thought leaders from all 4 Quad countries and beyond. First of all, I would like to thank the Ministry of External Affairs and ORF for giving birth to this forum. The Raisina Quad Think Tank Forum creates a space for free and deep exchanges with candor and marks a significant step forward in the evolution of Quad. My good friend Philip has already talked about much of the substance that I was going to speak. So I will try to avoid duplication as much as possible. So I'd like to share with you what I know from my experiences as Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's private secretary for foreign affairs for 7.5 years. The Quad, in my view, is a framework based on the vision of late Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Prime Minister Abe led the efforts to create the Quad, underpinned by two pillars. A, fundamental values such as freedom, democracy, human rights, and rule of law. And of course, B, common strategic interests. Prime Minister Abe talked about his vision, talked about his plans to create the Quad with his best friend, Tony Abbott, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. So on the margins of Brisbane G20 summit that Prime Minister Tony Abbott hosted back in 2014, he not only talked about his vision bilaterally, but he hosted a trilateral summit with Prime Minister Abbott and then US President Obama. He also did the same with Prime Minister Modi ji and had similar trilaterals on the margins of G20 Buenos Aires summit in 2018, and then again in G20 Osaka summit in 2019. So through these processes, the Quad finally had summit meetings, which just Philip mentioned moments ago. Prime Minister Abe also coined a brand new geopolitical concept, the Indo-Pacific, and projected his vision to keep this vast area free and open, with freedom of navigation, freedom of overflight, freedom of commerce and fishing, among others, as key elements. More than anything else, he believed that the rule of law must be the guiding principle to safeguard the peace and prosperity of the Indo-Pacific and the world. Prime Minister Abe designed the Quad to enhance the positions of its members in the world. From this enhanced position, Prime Minister Abe engaged President Xi Jinping and looked straight into his eyes and said, "Don't underestimate my determination to defend the Senkaku Islands." Second, and this is the important part, he designed the Quad to bring tangible benefits to the countries in the region so that the Quad will become the force for good. Today, Prime Minister Abe will be very pleased to see that so much of his vision has come to reality. I think Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is looking at us from high above. So as mentioned earlier, at the leaders level, the Quad had held 3 summits already. First in Washington, D.C., second in Tokyo, and third in Hiroshima last year, hosted by Prime Minister Albanese of Australia. It is Prime Minister Modi's turn to host the next Quad summit in India. The Quad foreign ministers also meet annually. This year, it is Japan's turn to host the foreign ministers meeting. And Japan stands ready to work with India and other Quad partners to make good preparations for a successful Quad summit in India. The value of Quad, in my view, lies in the uninhibited exchanges among the leaders on the pressing challenges of the time and in the strategic agenda setting by the leaders for their officials to work hard and work together to achieve these goals. Today, at the official level, there are 6 Quad working groups. 1, international health security. 2, climate change. 3, critical and emerging technology. 4, space. 5, infrastructure. 6, fiber. In addition to these, the Quad also puts high priority on maritime domain awareness, counterterrorism, and STEM fellowship, as Philip was mentioning. It is important to underline that the Quad members cooperate in complementary ways, with each doing what they can do best towards the shared strategic goals. This is the most efficient and productive way to bring tangible benefits to the countries in the region. The Quad must stay relevant to quickly changing realities on the ground. It is essential to constantly look for fresh ideas on what Quad can do to bring benefits to the countries in the region. So it is my sincere hope that the thought leaders gathered here today can engage in freewheeling and stimulating discussions on the future of the Quad. The value of the Raisina Quad Think Tank Forum is that you can think outside the box, even think the unthinkable on hypothetical scenarios and eventualities that officials normally find very difficult to discuss. In conclusion, I extend my best wishes for stimulating and insightful deliberations during the inaugural session of the Quad Think Tank Forum. May our collective efforts contribute to the preservation of peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific and the entire world. Thank you very much.